Hello beautiful people, my name's Serval, and today I will be talking about my experience at this year's Anime 405 in OKC. But before we get started, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you know when I make a new video. So let me preface this with the fact that since 2024, I've been to 5 conventions. The first being a tattoo convention called Villain Arts Fest, but I wasn't able to go this year because other things were going on. But then it was Super Anime Fest, Anime 405 2024, and GalaxyCon 2025. The most recent, of course, being Anime 405 of this year. So I have moderate experience when it comes to conventions, and they all have their own stories and they can all be their own videos, but today I'm talking specifically about Anime 405. Also, I'm really sorry it took me so long to post again, but I am an expert at procrastination. Anyway, this year I decided I was going to cosplay as Nezuko for this event, because ever since I watched the first episode last year, I have been non-stop hyperfixated on Demon Slayer. But of course it was occasionally accompanied by other hyperfixations like Attack on Titan, Yuri on Ice, and right now Stray Kids. I might actually make another video about them because as a new stay, I got some thoughts. But as usual, throughout the year, I was keeping an eye on the guest list to see if there were any voice actors I recognized, and there were definitely a few. Like, for instance, there were 7 of the Demon Slayer cast, all of whom I was able to meet. They include Zach Aguilar, who voiced Tanjiro. There was also Abby Trott, who voiced Nezuko, John Young Bosch, who voiced Giyu, and apparently also he was the Black Ranger in the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He was the second one, not the first one, though. There was also Brianna Knickerbocker, who voiced Kanao, and Erica Harlecker, who voiced Shinobu. I know, I freaking butchered their names. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. But there was also Mark Whitten, who voiced Rengoku, and Amberly Connors, who voiced Nakime. But also, there was some other pretty big ones, like, for instance, Greg Baldwin, who was the second voice of Uncle Iroh, and there was also Dante Bosco, who voiced Zuko. And then, kind of standing on her own, was Linda Young, who played Genkai ni Hakusho and was the original voice of Frieza in Dragon Ball Z. So I want to start with Greg Baldwin because I had a really special experience with him. Now I need to provide some context for those heathens who haven't seen Avatar yet or just don't know the situation with Iroh's voice actors. So I'm sure everyone remembers the tear-jerking moment from Tales of Ba Sing Se when Iroh sings Leaves from the Vine. Well, that song and episode were the final recordings ever of his original voice actor Mako, because he died shortly after recording from esophageal cancer. So in the show, it was Iroh grieving his dead son, but in real life it was also Mako grieving his own death because he knew how soon it would come. And it came on July 21st, 2006, when he was 72 years old. So knowing this, that his second voice was coming, I wanted to do something to honor Mako. And because Winterguard season had just started, I decided to do a routine to Leaves from the Vine. It was very emotional for me to do, but I was able to think of some simple choreo, perfect it, and video it to show Greg Baldwin at the convention. When I made it to his table, there wasn't a line. There was just one person talking to him and getting a selfie. This gave me time to look at his table, and he had beautiful prints and even tea with references to the show. My favorite was a tea called Hot Leaf Juice, which was a reference to when Iroh started a job at a bad tea shop in Ba Sing Se. Then I looked at the prices, and it was pretty average, with selfies being around $20 and prints being $40, with an additional $20 for a quilt add-on, but there was an extra note that said hugs were free and just to ask. And that already got me kind of emotional, and I knew I had to get a hug from this wonderful man. So he finished with the man in front of us, and we started off with a hug. Then after that, I showed him my routine. I was already emotional just by meeting Iroh's voice actor, but then there's the added audio of the song that had me very close to tears, and I saw him getting emotional as well, so I kind of felt bad about that. So when the video was done, he told me that because I gave him something, he would give me something as well, and that something was a free selfie. So completely out of the blue and completely unplanned, I got a picture with Greg Baldwin. And as you can probably see from my face, I am about to cry. And I did, after one last hug and a goodbye.
If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile tiny shells drifting in the foam. Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy comes marching home.
So staying with the Avatar voice actors, I also met Dante Bosco, the voice of Zuko, everyone's favorite firebender, unless you're weird and you like Azula. Now, I had the longest line that I was willing to go into. Of course, Sean Schemmel, I know I butchered that name as well, had a fucking long-ass line because he's fucking Goku, and I wasn't even gonna try to get in his line because, yes, it would be awesome to meet Goku, but I was only planning on buying one thing, and I'm sure that because of his line, I would wait for 2 hours and only see him for 2 seconds. Anyway, I ended up staying in Dante's line for about an hour, and I met a cool Doma cosplayer. We took a picture, talked for a while waiting, and also while I was waiting, I missed the K-pop Demon Hunter sing-along panel, but I was halfway through the line, and I wasn't willing to give up my spot for something I do literally every day in my room anyway. So once I made it through the line, I was reminded that he was in a movie from 1999 called But I'm a Cheerleader, where he played
Dolph, homosexual varsity wrestler.
I playfully brought up the movie before showing him the routine, and I confidently say that he liked it. Though he didn't seem to get emotional like Greg Baldwin did, but that's probably because I started very lighthearted by mentioning, but I'm a cheerleader. Now let's talk about Linda Young before I start talking about Demon Slayer's voice actors. So Linda Young is the legendary voice actor between Genkai and Frieza. But we mainly talked about Yu Yu Hakusho, except for when I asked her about how she was able to maintain Frieza's voice, to which she told me that he is slightly harder than Genkai because she's closer to her actual voice, which I can confirm. She definitely voiced Genkai. So then we started talking about Yu Yu Hakusho, how it was the first anime I watched to completion, and then it got a little awkward and sort of embarrassing when I started talking about Kurama. For context, I like femboys. That's why Felix is my bias. So without thinking, I told her that Kurama was my first anime crush, to which she responded with, "Oh yeah, I've heard that a lot. He's also voiced by my son." When I heard that, I swear, I fucking died. I already was extremely nervous when meeting voice actors. That has not changed at all since my first convention, meeting Griffin Burns. Even the second time I met him at Anime 405 last year and got a Mui print, I still was stumbling over my words. But this was on another level. After she said that, I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. But Anyway, then I just walked away while avoiding eye contact with absolutely everyone and just holding my head down, hoping no one heard me. Man, this video is getting very long, and I haven't even started talking about the Demon Slayer voice actors. So of course, my anxiety was high, because this was my first interaction of the day, and I had a drawing of Demon King Tanjiro I wanted to show Zach Aguilar. Though my anxiety did let up a little bit when I was waiting in Zach Aguilar's line, because he just randomly started screaming Mr. Giyu at Johnny Young Bosk with no reaction, to which he said, he ignores me in real life too. That let up some anxiety for a little while, until I was next in line to meet him. So I was just looking at the prints of Tanjiro and Aether to calm myself down, studying the artworks, trying not to freak out at the fact that I was like 2 feet away from a real life Tanjiro. So when it was my turn, I showed him my drawing, which he liked, and we talked briefly. I don't really remember what exactly we talked about, unfortunately. Probably because I was stressing the fuck out because it was the beginning of a convention. Next was the voice of Kanao, who had a very short line, and I got this print from. I remember seeing it and I was like, I need this now. So she signed it and told me that I should get it signed by Abby Trott to complete it. Then we talked about how Kanao is probably the most underrated character in Demon Slayer, especially when it comes to anime fans. And she told me that what it was like to record the scream from Infinity Castle when Kanao discovers Shinobu was killed by Doma. I also brought up that the first clip I ever saw of Infinity Castle was on TikTok of the scream in sub, and it still gives me chills. Anyway, print in hand, I went to Abby Trott's booth, the nerves setting in once again, knowing that I was in fact about to be Nezuko's voice actress in a Nezuko cosplay, and get a signature and a selfie, which was the main reason I even went in the first place. So we talked, she signed the print on Nezuko's side, and I realized that selfies with her were actually free, which is in fact very rare at conventions, and I respect that. So I got a picture, I was on my way to Mark Witten, the voice of the one and only Rengoku, my favorite Hashira. And I just want to say, he definitely deserved the role. It was the last 30 minutes of the convention, and I was exhausted, only being kept awake by anxiety and residual adrenaline from first coming in and meeting all the voice actors. And it didn't help that Mark is a freaking amazing person, and he spends like 8 minutes with every person, which is great when meeting him, but also absolutely horrible when you're waiting in line. So I'm waiting in line and sort of falling asleep on my feet when it came to be my turn. And holy shit, he talked so loud. He yelled tasty in Rengoku's voice, and I jumped up and I'm like, I'm awake. Even his normal voice is just so loud, and I'm not even joking. It was so loud that it vibrated my entire body and kind of gave me a headache after, because of how intense and sudden it was. So I took a step back and we talked about Demon Slayer and Genshin, because he also voices Kazuha, who escaped me through a 50-50 loss to fucking Dea. So I said goodbye to Mark, and that was the end of the convention. I hadn't bought any comfy shoes, so I was standing and walking and sometimes running in very uncomfortable shoes for about 8 hours straight with little to no breaks because I gotta go for the entire convention, man. Like, you're gonna miss something if you don't. But even though I never do this in cars, I just immediately just took my shoes off just in the car, and I fell asleep on the way home where I had a very intense post-convention crash where I just fell asleep on my hardwood floors. Then, of course, I had to go to work the next morning, so that was fun. Anyway, that was my wonderful yet exhausting and slightly embarrassing at times experience at Anime 405, and of course, I will be returning next year and possibly even volunteering if I can find time to do so. I will see you on the next video, which I plan to be about Winterguard, so let's look forward to that, and hopefully, it will come out before the season is over in April. Fingers crossed. Alright, bye y'all. I hope everyone has had a wonderful 2026, and I'll see you in the next one.